down at the actual conference. So you will have some very important matters to bring back, and what we will probably be covering is there'll be two major changes. I'm sorry. There'll be two minor changes to our bylaws that we'll be discussing, and we will explain those later. And then there's going to be some resolutions that we're going to discuss. The first one is dealing with state mandates. We're calling for a moratorium on the new mandates. The second is demanding truth on reporting for private special education schools into the accurate expenses and salaries to executives. And mandatory pre-kindergarten is a topic. Reinstating our positions on charter school reform, and dealing with the cost of Common Core and PARCC, along with fingerprinting, allowing earmarks in the federal budget. We want this to be a collaborative, open discussion, and for questions to occur. And hopefully it will be enlightening for new members who have no idea what the Delegate Assembly is and will learn and take home what to do. And for those who are our longevity school committee members, will have some robust discussions to bring forward at the Delegate Assembly in November. So right now, the food is coming out. We're going to take a break. You can all grab your food, and then we'll proceed with the program. So thank you. Hello again, everybody. I hope you're all enjoying your food, and please feel free to go get some more. There's plenty, and then dessert will be out momentarily also. So again, I want to reiterate that we're trying again something new. It's the first time we've ever had a meeting to review the resolutions, and hopefully this will bring back some robust conversations to your school committee people. What I'd like to do is bring up Pat Francomano, who is going to kind of review us what is the Delegate Assembly.
I don't know. What is, oh, sorry.
What is?
I was going to ask you.
What is the Delegate Assembly? Well, actually, this could be an interactive thing. Do you want to ask some of the audience what is the Delegate Assembly?
What I'm curious about is how many people here are going to be delegates? Oh, excellent. Excellent. You know, nobody, you haven't decided yet. All right. So how many people have been to a Delegate Assembly before? So for those of you that are experienced, you may have even more questions than those that haven't been exposed to it before. Or you may have some great comments on what the Delegate Assembly is and what you've seen happen and what you've been confused about. So please make sure that you ask those questions. I'm just going to give a brief overview of what the Delegate Assembly is. Glenn is then going to speak to the mechanics of what happens at the Delegate Assembly. It's essentially our governing body. Glenn has actually described it as a 130-member school committee meeting, which is a scary concept in and of itself. The Delegate Assembly is responsible for electing the officers of MASC. It's responsible for passing the bylaws for MASC. And additionally, and perhaps most importantly, it establishes our public policy directly from the membership by virtue of the resolutions that are passed at the Delegate Assembly. And you should have received it, I believe, last week. We prepared a special guide as a supplement to the Delegate Manual. And is there anybody who hasn't gotten that yet? Okay. Nope. Okay. So you should receive it. You should have received it about a week ago in the mail, but follow up with us afterwards, and we'll make sure that we get one out to you. Tonight, what we're going to do, as Charlene indicated, we're going to walk through each of the resolutions. Some of them sort of speak for themselves. We'll offer a comment or two, and then see if other people have any questions about them or want to discuss them in more length. Glenn, at this point, I would turn it over to you and ask you if you would be so kind as to deal with the mechanics of the Delegate Assembly.
Just one question.
Sure.
I got a sheet that told me about voted in for lifetime membership?
That's correct.
Is that the same thing as you're talking about?
It should be, yes. And part of that is there's a supplement within that talks about the rules and regulations, if you will, how we put together the delegate assembly, and it should include actually a copy of even a layout of what the room looks like. You didn't get that? Okay. So we need to figure that one out.
We have a couple of documents that were provided to you. One of them is a guide to the delegate assembly, and that's on the table. You received in the mail your delegate manual, which is a very formal document that includes the association's financial statement and reports from the various committees. But the guide to the delegate assembly was put together specifically for this meeting to help facilitate a longer discussion about the resolutions themselves. So with regard to the delegate assembly, it is a 130-member school committee meeting. As many people can speak as wish to line up at the microphone and speak to the extent that time permits. We use parliamentary procedures. We use Robert's Rules of Order. We've provided everyone with a Robert's Rules cheat sheet if you'd like to use one. Occasionally, we do have to invoke the rules. Among the most frequent motions made at the delegate assembly are the motions to close debate so that they can proceed to a vote. You understand that 130 opinionated people will all want to speak, and there are certain districts where the delegate insists on speaking to every resolution that occurs, so it can be a long process. Resolution sponsors get to speak for 10 minutes. Other speakers get to speak for 3 minutes apiece. Other non-delegates may speak after all delegates have spoken, and if they're recognized by the chair. The general rule of thumb, what we like to encourage, is that brief is good, because you all know how quickly you tune out if someone's not getting to the point, and it's very helpful at a delegate assembly to do that. Now, the resolutions will appear on the agenda of the delegate assembly in the same order that we've provided them in the book and in the order that they exist in the delegate manual, so you know what's coming up and when. If you wish to propose an amendment, the amendments need to be in writing. There's an amendment form that you can use. It's in the delegate manual. We have another one there for you, or any written form of an amendment turned into the clerk so that we can put it up on the scoreboard. We have a jumbotron at the delegate assembly so people can watch the amendments being made. And finally, despite what people may or may not say on the floor of the delegate assembly, it was Edmund Burke who said the individual may be foolish, but the species is wise, and the majority rules at the delegate assembly. So there are some resolutions that are out there that may be subject to some amendments that will dramatically change them. And we'll be talking about that later on, so look forward to debating those when the delegate assembly takes place. With that, Charlene, or Pat, as the chairman of the Resolutions Committee, can take you to the next step.
Thank you, Glenn. One of the things to keep in mind, and everyone approaches this a little bit differently, and as you go back to your committees and you discuss the resolutions, some districts, some committees will simply say, do what you think best. Others will say, we are in support of resolutions 1, 2, and 3. We don't agree with 4. We don't agree with 5. The thing to keep in mind is that as you are either receiving or giving instructions to your delegate, it is important to remember that there's a good chance there will be an amendment or two offered on the floor. Now, if you have given very strict instructions to your delegate that say, essentially, we're in support of this, you may want to consider giving the delegate some discretion with respect to amendments that may be offered. Okay? People have questions on that? Okay. So there are two bylaw changes that are being offered, and those bylaw changes relate to both, one relates to the term of office of the various officers from the divisions, so that those office periods coincide with the remainder of the board of directors. The other bylaw change is one related to the executive committee that permits the executive committee to act essentially in emergency situations in the absence of the full board of directors. Questions on those two? Very rare that we find ourselves in a position on the board to have to do that, to act, but sometimes an emergency position may come up, and we need to act without having to call the entire board together. Yes?
What kind of emergencies are you talking about? Trying to think of natural disasters and that type of thing?
No, something that might involve a piece of legislation, something we've had instances where we might have to. There may be a filing deadline for an amicus brief, and all of a sudden we're being asked to file an amicus brief with the court. Well, we want to be in a position to be able to respond to that. So rather than having to call the full board together, we can make that decision. Yes?
How have you done it before?
Well, I think it would be accurate to say that in the past, the executive board has acted as an executive board, but not necessarily under the assumption that it had the authority to go forward to do that. And then what would happen is that action would be ratified by the entire body, and essentially with the knowledge of the entire body. Follow up? Yes. Yep.
Did you ever call meetings by phone and email?
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. Yes. We have that. We also have the ability to have meetings electronically if we need to. Anybody else? All right. So moving to the resolutions. Resolution number 1 talks about unfunded mandates and new testing. Questions on that one? It's resolution number 1. Again, this is something that we are obviously, dealing with on an annual basis, and it gets aggravated as time goes by. Yeah. Sure.
If I recall, I think the reason why this came to a resolution is one of the biggest things was a year ago was when the fingerprinting legislation came into effect. And then amongst all the other umpteen million mandates that have occurred, I believe that what we did is, put our hands up and say enough is enough. So as school committee people, we're responsible fiscally for a lot of these things, but yet the mandates occur. So that was one of the reasonings behind this resolution is to, say, hey, stop the mandates, let's talk about this and let's, you know, get a grip on what's really going on with the monetary and the fiduciary's responsibility.
And the other part of that as well was with the, you know, the technology piece of PARCC that not everybody saw coming down the pike and was a bit of a reality slap to I think many of our members in terms of the cost of, you know, being able to fulfill your obligations under that test if you were giving it electronically. Yes?
On top of it all, it's the evaluation procedure.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the superintendent.
Sure.
principal, And the school committee, they evaluate the superintendent.
Right.
There's a lot of extra paperwork. And I understand that Susan Brunk is really on our side when it comes to identifying. She clearly states that these things are unfunded mandates.
It's my understanding that the auditor was in fact in the process of examining several other issues regarding unfunded mandates, including some of the charter school work.
Just one of the examples of where the auditor came to our side and helped us out over the past couple of years was regarding the McKinney-Vento Act and the transportation of homeless students. The audit that her office gave out actually led the legislature and forced the legislature to fund that unfunded mandate that all of our school districts, no matter how small we are, deal with. So, you know, it's very important that when we're looking at these unfunded mandates, we also stay in constant communication with the auditor's office to make sure that they're abreast of them so they can hopefully find their way and be highlighted by her office and find its way into some sort of funding or some sort of legislation to support it. So there is an ability for us to take a stand with this resolution, the Board of Directors feel, and that will lead us, I think, in the future to address some of those legislatively.
Any other questions? Sorry, yes.
Just for at the end of your, the paragraph now, therefore be it resolved that, is that an asterisk at the end of work, or is it something else? And then this is a quote.
It's quote.
Where's the beginning of the quote?
There is no beginning of the quote. That's a typographical error. Before the word "we," let's all imagine a quote.
First I thought it was an asterisk, I was trying to find out what it was. I'm sorry.
Good catch. No, thank you. Yes,
This is my first time, like, newly elected, but
welcome.
didn't we have this last year as a resolution, the unfunded mandates? I remember that being brought up, wasn't it last year?
It is a consistent resolution that we have proposed, or that has been presented to us. And if I recall correctly, this was one that was presented by a sufficient number of committees that it automatically goes on. So
Is this going on the second year, or is this multiple years, or?
multiple years. I've seen this at least 3 or 4 times, I think. Anybody else? So the next one, resolution number 2, is referencing special education and reporting requirements that mirror the reporting requirements and disclosure statements that are comparable to a public offering, if you will, in the business world.
So I think this resolution came about, if you recall, there was a collaborative on the North Shore that had some misdealings with their financial status and paying of the executive of the collaborative significant amount of funds and misuse of funds. So what this resolution is hoping to do is to create a transparency amongst the programs, not necessarily the collaborative, but also the private programs of special education where if you're involved with special ed, you know that when you go into, like, for instance, the May Institute, which is a private entity, they don't have to necessarily disclose what is their administrative fees, or what is their administrative funds that they're using. So this was to bring forth and bring to the surface the payments or the use of what the funds are that we are actually paying out to.
Gives us an opportunity to peek behind the curtain, if you will, to find out and to assure ourselves that there aren't any extraordinary executive fees, that sort of thing, and that the money that we are, the public monies that are going to these private entities are being spent wisely.
Roles that we have as elected school committee members is to also be good stewards of the public dollar. When we're spending, on average, sometimes upwards of tens of thousands of dollars to private companies, to private agencies that are out there, just like we're responsible to our constituents for the dollars we spend in district, shouldn't the contractors that we employ be responsible to those that are funding them to shed light on where those funds are going and how they're being spent? So it's basically an extension of our stewardship of the public dollars and shedding a light on where we're spending our money and how we're spending it. So it's just more of a good government type policy that's on here. And as you know, on there, districts are spending upwards, in some cases, above $50,000 a year on one particular program or one particular student. The public school committee members deserve a right to know where those dollars are actually going to.
Yes?
So it says file for and support legislation. Do we have support for this on the Hill? File this?
Well, we would not know that officially. We wouldn't be going to the Hill until this resolution was approved.
Sure.
With all of the resolutions that we're going to be talking about tonight that talk about legislation in it, we're at the beginning right now, starting in January, of a brand new legislative session, where all the bills have a couple of weeks to be filed on there. So basically, we're starting with a blank slate come January 1st, when the new legislature and the new governor take office. So it will be the decisions that the Delegate Assembly makes that will guide our advocacy basically for the next 2 years, because of the fact that there is a 2-year legislative cycle. So that's why at this point in time, I think our legislators are fully aware of our feelings on a lot of these issues, but this puts it into writing, and this gives us an opportunity to join with other organizations that are out there that might support the same interests that we are, and kick off this legislative session right.
Is there another question? If you read we jokingly refer sometimes to the Delegate Assembly, or at least I jokingly refer to the Delegate Assembly as the Framingham School District Delegate Assembly. And we are pleased to have with us Beverly Hugo from the Framingham School District tonight. She sits on the Board of Directors as well. Welcome, Beverly. Thank you for coming down.
What happened in Framingham?
Everything happens in Framingham. The third resolution is also sponsored by Framingham, Universal Quality Pre-Kindergarten Access in Massachusetts. This has been a hot-button topic for a number of years. Many studies out there that indicate the importance of early childhood education and the clear gap between the number of students who are financially able to participate and the number of students who actually do. So, questions on resolution number 3? Yes. Good question. Framingham want to address that? Please, Beverly.
I just received a call from the Newton school committee, and they wanted to put on
To reflect.
over kindergarten.
So that will be an amendment that will go down at the Delegate Assembly.
So now, as you go back to your school committees, and you're talking about this particular article, you're in a position to be able to say that you know that this article there will be an effort made to amend this article at the Delegate Assembly. So be aware that you need to know how you're going to support that. We had a question back. Yes? I think that the nature of the resolution is such that file or support legislation that will provide the appropriation. When we say the appropriation, it's meaning financial appropriation. But certainly, if that is something that people think needs clarification, that could be a subject of an amendment. John?
I would just suggest any new program like this, you gotta be careful in the funding, that they don't take it out of a big pool. In other words,
It has to be new. It has to be tied to new funding. It can't be tied to existing
yeah,
funding.
you can't take away from transportation or something.
Right.
Because then you're going nowhere. By the way, Mr. President-elect, from the last election, when the new legislature is sworn in, there's 28 new members.
Wow. Interesting. Mindy?
I'd like to say, for years we've spoken about a reevaluation of the formula. The state's obligation to support education, the kickbacks that all the towns get and all the regional schools get. It's the state's portion to pay for education. And it's only this year that the legislation has actually appointed a committee to study the formula. And the reason that they've been reluctant to do this is because everybody knows it's dreadfully inadequate. And the results of the study will probably be a great embarrassment to the state legislature because they really be shortchanging the schools. And they put a lot of stress on property taxes and on the towns themselves. It's my understanding that this committee that is going to be studying the formula is actually very close to what I would consider a dream team. There are superintendents on this committee that I really respect. There are people from MMA, from the taxpayer. There's all different groups that are being represented. I mean, Glenn probably knows better than I on this particular committee that will be studying the formula. And as they study it, things like full-day kindergarten, I'm certain are also going to enter into the discussion. So what I'm suggesting is that the economy truly is, we have bottomed out in Massachusetts, and the economy, at least I feel, and this year, at least in my school, I feel like things are a little loosening up just a little bit. And I feel very positive going forward that we're coming out of the terrible economic slump that we fell into. These things are all very positive, and I have a lot of hopes for this committee.
Thank you. Anything further? We're going to be talking a little bit more at the end of once we get through the resolutions about the Chapter 70 Study Committee. Yes.
That was my question. With the formula that you're talking about, Chapter 70.
Correct. Anybody else on resolution number 3? Resolution number 4 was sponsored by the MASC Board of Directors and reflects our ongoing concerns about charter schools, specifically with funding mechanisms and their failure to live up to their promises when they were first enacted back under education reform, et cetera. You'll see that we have a list of 7 items concerning charter school reform, some of which were discussed, many of which were actually discussed in the bill that was before the legislature in the spring, but then was ultimately defeated. Questions on the charter school resolution? Going once? What were you gonna say?
I was just, maybe you could explain a little bit about the inequities of what, so,
The issue regarding charter schools, the funding that you all, one of the issues with charter schools is the simple fact that the funding of charter schools takes away from the larger pool of money that could otherwise be going to traditional public schools. They are going to schools that are, in many instances, not as equitable as your districts. They are not serving special needs kids. They are certainly not serving severe special needs kids. They are not serving transient populations. They are not serving low-income students and ESL students as well. All those kids that they were supposed to be serving. Now, that's not to say that there aren't some that are doing that job, and they're doing it well, and kudos to them. But the rest are frauds. They're not living up to their promise. When you have a child that's sent back to you, to your district, who has special needs because they say they can't handle those special needs, you don't have that opportunity. When there's a child that they send back to your district, somehow they manage to counsel them back and out of their school because there are behavior issues, you don't have that. Because the difference between them and us is we educate everybody. Question?
Item number 5, establishment of benchworks. So there, I'm not familiar, charter schools, I think they don't pay any tax? They don't?
No, they do.
they do.
They do.
Establish, what are the benchmarks?
Well, the question is, what makes a successful charter school? Should it be serving the same cross-population that you are? Should it be serving the same number of special needs students that you are? Should it be serving the same number of ESL students that you are? Please.
So who would establish the benchmark?
That's something to be discussed. It's you know, when you prepare a resolution, because it's going to be legislative in nature, it tends to be fairly broad to give you the opportunity to massage it in the way that it needs to be massaged.
6 and 7 are underlined, why is 6 and 7 underlined?
Glenn goes crazy sometimes. You know, it was probably Friday afternoon. He said, "I haven't highlighted anything all week long." I think because of the fact that those are really, I mean, everything is important there. But 6 and 7 really go to the heart of some of the things that we've been discussing over the last years, especially when it comes to the inequities. Or he just felt like underlining something.
Charter schools address some of the inequities. I mean, I'm not a proponent of the charter schools, but when I serve on a school committee, I appreciate the value of the public education. But not all districts are equal. You know, we have a neighboring district that does really well. Our district does mediocre. And I don't blame the parents who choose to send their kids to a charter school that does better for the kids, their kids after. So they certainly offer a very, very important role, very important value.
And for many students, they do. And I don't think anyone argues that point. I think what there is an argument about, and there is a concern about, is the equity issue. There was a question back here. Sir.
Don't we need to speak to the fact that charter schools are exempt from free and appropriate public education? And that's the heart of the issue?
Correct.
There's legislation on the books that all public schools have to adhere to, called PARCC, which stands for free and appropriate
Agreed. Yes, sir.
I say that a little differently. A lot of the private charter schools are premiums, the bottom line. They're taking the best kids they can out of our districts. We end up with the kids that are the ones that really have the need for the special education. I don't mean just fed, but they don't have that. They've got the top of the kids in line. They end up with scores with no problems. And in fact, back in our system, when you take all of your good kids out of your system, then that automatically lowers your scores, for your whole system. So that's another piece that's there too. And then there's you're talking, actually, there are two private schools, the public schools are running, charter schools, and then the ones that are truly private.
Correct.
And within the private, you got the profit-making ones, which is another ballgame. So all these are separate entities that are doing different things, nothing to our benefit, period.
Correct. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I have a small problem. In the United States, we're supposed to be a free society. We're supposed to have choice. We're supposed to be free people. Now, I hear the arguments that are going on here. Like you said, charter schools perform a need. What's the other type of school? Not public school.
Private?
Private.
Private.
Private schools perform a need, okay? So in America, unfortunately, if you have enough money, you can do anything. You don't know that. But I believe charter schools do fulfill a need in that charter schools actually help the public schools to become better, in my opinion. Because it's competition.
Okay.
Could you rephrase the question, please?
The opinion was that that charter schools serve public education as a whole, in part because they create competition and force your traditional public school to try to beef it up. The problem that you sometimes run into, though, is that I would love to beef it up. I would love to be able to provide the kind of services that are being provided at the charter school. But as you siphon off more money, and I'm left with a limited funding, and I'm left with students who are higher needs, I'm not playing on a level, it's fine to be competitive, and I'm all for competition. I think you're right. It has raised the level of, certainly for many of us. But until such time as you're going to make it equitable funding as well, I'm in a tough position to compete. Ma'am?
Just find an interesting thing here is, because I believe that by doing special education well, it will actually improve education overall. In some ways more so than, in some ways take all the gifted kids, good for you, you did a great job. If you can teach the special education children, that's where the innovation really comes into play. That's where rethinking how the human brain works really comes into play, and how to best educate and reach children. So, are there charter schools that actually do that, and why don't we actually ask the charter schools? Here we are paying these outrageous amounts of money for, as the other amendment shows, to these, for these out-of-places districts. What about charter schools that actually specialize in special education?
Well, when charter schools were first put into place, the concept was it was almost going to be laboratory in nature, so that the charter school would have the freedom to go out and try different things, and then come back and help us and share and help us replicate those things. I've never experienced that dynamic, and maybe shame on us for not forcing that dynamic, but that dynamic has not been the reality.
I'd love to see a certain percentage of special ed kids having to go to charter school.
Sir?
I was just going to point out that a really good resolution for MASC would be to focus on even greater inequity, which is most of the income for the
Yes.
My sense is the only difficulty with that is it's not equal across the entire United States. I mean, across the entire state of Massachusetts. I mean, those families that, or those communities that have a lot more of a financial base are able to assist their student bodies in their schools a lot more than school districts that are not heavily based within a large financial base and cannot do that. So I think we need to really look at that so that to make it equitable is to try and assist those districts that need more funding and to bring us all to the same level. And therefore, you know, it would help all of us because I think that has an impact on both those communities that are more affluent and those communities that are not as affluent. We move hand in hand, and our society does not progress unless we all lift.
And this ties into the Chapter 70 discussion as well. Did you have something?
No, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Okay. John?
Two things. My view is the charter school is giving a youngster a private education up front. That's my summary. But when you bring up special education, it came into effect in 1973, if I'm not mistaken. But it was interesting when 766 was written, because it wasn't written in the special ed that we understand it now. For example, a youngster we call gifted came under 766 in 1973. And then they found out they couldn't control that because everybody was getting assistance, so they cut it down. Originally, special education, your local communities were reimbursed at 110%. So I'll give you an example. If it cost the community $5,000 to educate the quote-unquote average kid, and a special education youngster costs $10,000, you took the $5,000 from the $10,000 and you funded it at 110%. They did that for 2 years, got financially in a hole, and the thing completely changed. So you gotta look at the history, and I was on the Sargent School Committee when that happened.
One of 12 committees you've been on over the last several years.
At least I got elected. But that's the thing. So when we gotta look at something, look at the history of where it came from.
Thank you. Sir?
I hope I'm not going on this, but, you know, we reached a point of self-preface. We can no longer fund the laws that we put in place. Now we have to pick and choose. Now our children suffer. We need somebody in there to somehow look at our law system, okay, and take away the laws we don't need, because we're spending more money than what we have. It's always been that. And I don't know how to stop that. Massachusetts is, as far as I'm concerned, bankrupt, okay, and we don't allocate the money properly.
Thank you. Did I have somebody over here? Mindy, did you have something? Yes.
So the last sentence in the rationale, so this has been proposed multiple times and it died in the legislation. It says advocates hope to secure an affirmation from the membership on these key principles of reform to silence critics who suggest that our membership does not support them. When you say critics, you mean politicians or the MSC? I don't understand.
Globally, if you will. I mean, sometimes what will happen is you'll have people who will say certain things about what MASC's position is or isn't, and this will, you know, this allows us to make it very clear what we support.
So just a level playing field, that we're not saying no to charter schools.
Correct. Anyone else? All righty. Resolution number 5, fingerprinting. This really arose from discussions we've had, complaints we've heard that it's a mess and it needs to be fixed. And if anybody thinks it's working well, then fine, and let us know. But that was the rationale for the fingerprinting, because we had a lot of people talking about, this isn't working, it's too cumbersome, and it's overwhelming, and there isn't necessarily a rationale for parts of the way it's working. So this was an effort to say, okay, let's stop and figure it out.
And I think some of the crux of that was that the question is who is going to pay for the fingerprinting. So it was discussed that if, when a teacher is up for their license, that they review and they are recertified or have certification, that they get their fingerprinting done then. So it's on the cost of, pretty much on their certification as opposed to the district. So it was, if you all recall, a year ago when we had a meeting, I mean, everybody was up in arms about the cost of this fingerprinting. $55 a whack, who was going to pay for it? So we thought that maybe this would be somewhat of a resolution that would occur.
Mindy?
Go ahead.
I thought the burden of payment was on the employee to the district.
First time through.
Okay.
But, I mean, there are districts that have offered to pay it for, that have negotiated to pay it for. Right.
But also, haven't we had enough people slip through the cracks with just the local quarries? These are our children, these are teachers who just, every one of the things that happen, this is the national database. I'm very, I don't know, I've lived around the country, I've been fingerprinted where I've taught in Chicago, I was fingerprinted in Virginia, I was fingerprinted, it was just part of, jump into the national database. And it didn't make me uncomfortable, I'm not anything.
I'm sorry.
I know that there may be a problem, but it's not, this is not an unfunded mandate that's been passed on to the schools. It's been passed on to the schools.
Well, it is an unfunded mandate if, in fact, if I am a subsequent employer, I am in district number 2, you've worked for district number 1, and I want to hire you, I can rely on district number 1's superintendent hiring you and saying, yes, she passed muster. Or if I don't want to rely on the superintendent, the burden is on me as the new district to have it done all over again.
Actually, I thought it was good for 2 years. And once you got fingerprinted, that it was every, how long?
It's
It is good, but not for the sending district. Many districts I know in my part of the state in western Massachusetts, let's say they get fingerprinted in Springfield, Mass, and they want to come to my home district of Ludlow, then we'd accept reciprocity. But certain districts out there, vice versa. If Ludlow certifies your fingerprints on there, Springfield isn't accepting reciprocity from other districts at this point.
Okay, so
And
I
that's,
agree with you.
that's an
I
issue.
think that should be our focus in our difficulty with fingerprinting, because frankly, I'm hiring teachers, and I am more comfortable with them being fingerprinted and scanned against a national database than just a local quarry. I really am. My liabilities are reduced substantially by that. There might be an argument about getting the employee to deal with the financial burden of having it done, but I have to buy a driver's license in order to drive. I really don't think that this is an unreasonable thing.
This is why we're saying also in the resolution, it should be done when you're being recertified or certified as a new teacher on there. Right now, it's a little bit loosey-goosey. This is why we have it in the resolution. Also establish DESE as a clearinghouse for all background checks for educators. So we can have a statewide system. You know, we talk about a lot of statewide issues, and we talk a lot about some things that DESE is putting on us. This is something that DESE is moving away from right now. We're saying,
Well, then
put it in their court.
Let's simplify, because simplifying is most effective. If we can focus on exactly what our objection is and what we would like to see done, and keep it as simple. You know, our success with the legislature has been when we've simplified and when we've unified, joined other groups to resolution.
Well, I think that the nature of the resolution is such that it's broad enough so that we can deal with a variety of issues that a superintendent or a school committee might be having an issue with. But certainly, the focus would be on the things that we just mentioned.
Okay, I don't know what it is for so far, I have a lot more comfortable, and feel that we have a lot more chance of success if we really focus.
I also think in our district, what I hear a lot from our administrative assistant who's handling a lot of this is not so much the teachers who are getting to it as is required by the law, but she's also getting fingerprint reports in for bus drivers and bus drivers for our special ed kids, people that we don't necessarily, she gets reports from people showing who they are, because they're not necessarily employees of our district, but our district is who they're sending the reports to, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about who should control some of those other people who are with our children every day.
And again, I think that was the reason for the breadth of the resolution, so it would allow us to talk about any number of issues, especially including that. Sir.
I just want to say that a driver's license is not the same as being fingerprinted, and a national fingerprinting is actually against our Constitution. I'm not saying that I have the answer here, but the point is how far do we go to make sure that our children are safe?
How far do we go to make sure our children are safe?
That's correct.
I'm willing to go.
Yeah, let's not do cross debate here. Can I ask?
Yes, sir.
In our district, we are also applying, I don't know if it's the law or our district, but applying it to the parents that chaperone the kids that are in close contact. I just wanted to get your perspective on whether that would belong into, can we do something for these groups? For some reason, those parents pay $35 as opposed to $55. I'd like to know why. They are cheaper.
Oh, the parents are cheaper than the,
Only certified teachers, paraprofessionals are only 35. They're not certified to 35. You're absolutely right.
So why didn't?
I don't know.
that's a good question. Let's find, we'll find out.
Make the teachers
Yeah.
$35 too then?
Yeah.
Very good question.
Question in the back. Yes. I'm sorry, could you speak up a little bit? Sorry.
Talks about mandate that the employees of public schools be fingerprinted, but under where the resolve that, it only uses teachers. Ensure teachers be fingerprinted, establish requirements of teachers. Shouldn't it be all school employees, not just teachers? Just the paraprofessionals and administrators?
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
That's a good amendment.
Yep. So that's something, again, to discuss with your committees. I don't know, Glenn, do we have the ability to do our own friendly amendments on the floor? Okay. So. Yeah. Yeah, those technical amendments we can certainly take care of. Thank you for that. Someone else? Yes, sir.
Two pieces. One is, I'd even carry that a step further. Anybody who's dealing with the children in the school day, that even though they're not our direct employee, but it could be the busing folks, sometimes the food folks, could be delivery people coming to the school. It can get broad without going crazy about it. But when you look at what's happened across the country, it's anybody that comes into this, has some kind of action, say, with our children, they should be checked. Second point is, we're not using today's technology to make this very easy, as the same as using what a lot of people do with a cell phone. That basically, all you do is take a picture, press a button, and it goes off to wherever it gets checked. It knocks out all that craziness about where and how much it costs. And it's very simple to do. And you could walk through a school, or people could come to wherever and have it done very simply instead of what presently is done in most places. That's the second piece. But that's something also that needs to be done. And it's done in a lot of, I know all the federal agencies do it. It's no bigger than a cell phone. It's done like that.
Interesting. Good. Thank you for that. There was another question. Yes.
Just a question technically about the difference between pouring and fingerprinting, and one from pouring all the parent on and fingerprinting. The law is only, but the law covers every employee of the district, is that right?
The law covers every employee of the district.
And doesn't-
Yes.
And does not speak for volunteers at all?
That's up to the superintendent's jurisdiction.
Yes. Yes, sir. Folks, please.
The concern that I have for doing a fingerprint on a national basis is to turn up people that might have done something in, say, New Hampshire, and then they come into our state to do our job. So, to me, it's a tremendous funding operation that we have here, just to turn out 3 teachers or 4 teachers from New Hampshire or Vermont or wherever to kick this out. I mean, they're doing Corey now, which is essentially what is being done by the fingerprint through the FBI, but it's there to seek out people that were working once upon a time in New Hampshire that did something bad and now want a job in Massachusetts. But I feel that the best way to handle the whole thing is just if you have been teaching in another state or something like that, to be able to do a nationwide search for you, but just for the sake of doing it. Now we're gonna carry this to school committee members, maybe all school committee members should be fingerprinted too then.
I gotta go.
That's gotta be out there.
Yes, sir, and then here.
Just a point of clarification, when we run a query, we also run a federal sorting on our query.
In your district.
No, when you run a criminal offense record report in Massachusetts, it's supposed to also, in conjunction, automatically do a sexual offender registry on a national database.
Okay.
Am I the only one who has this information? Could be wrong.
No, I think, mine was also related to that.
I'm not going down on any side of the argument.
Sure,
I
no.
just wanted to bring another point of information into the dialogue.
Interesting. Yes.
Another avenue that may be worthwhile to investigate is, like our local police department does fingerprinting, but their fingerprints are not good for this purpose. So if we could, I don't know why it has to be done by a certain agency, because our police department is certainly capable of checking somebody against the national, database. It would be, like, if we could change the legislation, unless there is a really good reason for doing it this way, it would be a lot cheaper, maybe free.
Thank you. I do need to move on because we're tight on time. If we have time afterwards, we can certainly come back to this. Jake, I'm going to let you handle the resolution number 6.
Resolution number 6 is a little different than most of the resolutions that come before the delegate assembly. Most of the resolutions, even the ones that we've discussed here tonight, basically pertain to state-level policies. Resolution number 6 is something a little bit different. When your board of directors for MASC, when Pat, myself, Charlene, go to Washington, D.C., and we talk to our federal legislators, especially in the Massachusetts delegation, the federal system is a little bit different than the Massachusetts system, where in the federal system right now in the Congress, earmarks or specific projects that might be dedicated to a particular district have been outlawed since about 2007, 2008. So right now, just as many of your school districts benefit from a project that local legislators who know your school districts, who know your buildings, can sponsor amendments to grow certain programs at the state level can get in there. For example, in my local school district, our collection of school districts around us came together and started an advanced manufacturing program for a specific need. And the legislature actually allowed us and earmarked close to $500,000 for the startup costs for that program. Federal legislators don't have the ability to do this at this point. And so what resolution number 6 does is it doesn't make a position at the state level, but it makes a position at the federal level to say to our legislators and our affiliate, the NSBA, the National School Board Association, to get on record supporting the reinstatement of these programs that have helped out our districts in the past, and our districts for the past few years haven't been eligible to participate in. So it's a basic, it's more of a policy statement than an actual legislative statement, but it's something that puts ourselves on the marker for federal issues and actually responds to some of the concerns that we hear from our legislators when we go to Washington.
Questions on that one? Yes.
On the rationale, appropriations for discrete purposes.
shy, demure. I think specific
Yep.
is what is really, you know.
Specific is what we're trying to say there.
Yes, sir.
Benefited with, I'm not a native speaker, but is benefited with one T or two Ts?
I think two.
I think it's good.
Can I plead guilty here?
Or one.
There are two forms of the word discrete.
And only he would know this.
Well, the ETE is a general noun. EET means diplomatic. I used the wrong discrete in this paragraph. It should be DRSCRETE. Okay? That means we're talking about a specific thing, not a sensitive thing.
And what we're saying is restoration of earmarks at the federal level for local municipal projects, i.e. school projects, school buildings, school resources. What was that?
Anybody else? Any other questions? All right, going on to the last resolution, resolution number 7. Resolution number 7 was proposed by the resolution committee. There was a resolution before us that we had rejected, which called for, if I recall correctly, the elimination of Common Core and also elimination of PARCC. The reason that we were concerned about that resolution is that at this point, most of our districts have aligned their curriculum, we believe, with Common Core. Now, if you were to throw, and spent a lot of money doing it, you throw out Common Core, you're talking about another significant financial obligation to revamp. So that did not seem to be a wise choice. However, we also felt that it was necessary to go forward and say, we have some very serious concerns about the way PARCC has been implemented and the way, both in terms of funding issues, lack of collaboration in the early stages with a sufficient number of stakeholders. And so we had some very serious concerns about PARCC. What we also wanted to do, however, was by putting this forward, give people an opportunity, and again, there can be amendments on the floor. If somebody is, there's a good chance somebody may make an amendment on the floor to petition the legislature to eliminate PARCC and have that as MASC's marching orders. That's been attempted in the past, but from a procedural standpoint, it couldn't be done because it wasn't appropriate. So this gives, we felt very strongly that the forum needed to have the opportunity to debate, and that's why, in addition to making it clear that we were very concerned about how PARCC was implemented and some of the dollar issues involving PARCC as well, we also wanted to make sure that there was an opportunity for a debate on the floor.
Very strongly. Do you recall what the split was when the board voted on this?
It was, I believe it was a unanimous vote. When we voted on putting resolution number 7, that was a unanimous vote. Yes.
I don't know if this is right.
Give it a shot.
So the head of the new MTA person, she's opposed to Common Core PARCC, is that correct?
That is correct.
Is that fair to say? So this would go hand in hand, maybe? Get everything out on the table and discuss it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can all acknowledge that there has been significant discussion surrounding, at the very least, PARCC. Some people also discuss PARCC in the same breath as they do Common Core and fail to distinguish between the two, which are significantly distinguishable.
I'm not too up on the
The difference being that Common Core is a set of standards. No, they're a set of states, they're the foundation for the state standards that Massachusetts has adopted. Massachusetts has adopted standards that go beyond, in fact, the foundation of Common Core. PARCC, and then based upon those standards, you are charged to adopt a curriculum that will, at the very least, address those standards. And you have the freedom to go beyond that if you want. PARCC is the mechanism by which, for now, the state has chosen to assess achievement as compared to those levels. Yes. Yeah, it's a standardized test similar to MCAS.
So PARCC is the assessment.
PARCC is the assessment tool.
Many states throughout the country are rejecting Common Core, is that correct?
They're rejecting.
Is that fair to say?
There are some that are rejecting PARCC or some variation of it. They're all over the map. Yes.
Do you know what split ended up being between
I think it was about 60-40, is that, yeah. No, I think it was in favor of MCAS. I mean, one of the reasons, and
Are you talking about school districts or states? School districts, okay. Yep.
Correct.
Massachusetts school district.
Massachusetts districts, yes. Yeah.
they were predicting it was going to be 60-45. You're telling me it was actually the opposite?
60-45. It was 60-40 PARCC, okay. Okay. And that did include the charter schools. If you took out the charter schools, it would flip.
But that was only for what they would do in the transition year.
Correct.
The State Board of Education has not yet determined whether there will be a formal movement to PARCC. And the resolution was designed so that the people who want to get rid of PARCC and Common Core will have an opportunity to propose an amendment and let the membership tell them whether they agree or disagree. In the past 2 years, they have been unable to even get it on the agenda because there was never more than 3 delegates who wanted to even discuss it. This year, now there's a heightened awareness of the issue and more people are taking interest. So we're interested in seeing.
And I think that's one of the important things to consider when we're having this discussion, debate, etc. We take, the allegations regarding the commissioner are all well and good, but it doesn't matter to the essential discussion of, is Common Core a reasonable set of standards for public education in Massachusetts? That's the question. What else do we have? Any other questions? Comments? So when you are talking to your districts about this one, again, heads up, there could be a couple of variations on this theme.
2 issues.
Right, two separate issues, one involving, one in requesting perhaps the elimination of PARCC, the other requesting the elimination of Common Core. Yes, sir.
Just a quick comment. The last time we had this meeting in this location, we had invited a great number of representatives from the Great General Court.
Correct.
It seems that's completely not the case anymore. Basically, the school committee members here.
This is our discussion. The purpose of this discussion is to get people engaged and ready for the delegate assembly. One of the things that we've heard over the last year is people who have said, I went to the delegate assembly, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. And I said, Jake, you really should at this point.
It's a good thing you didn't say me.
So that's what this is a response to. And the idea is that we want to make sure people are as well informed and have an opportunity to have these discussions with their school committees before you walk into the delegate assembly. it will make, we think, for a much more robust discussion at the delegate assembly and a more pointed discussion.
And I think the intent was also for those who are new school committee members who have really no clue what the delegate assembly is. And you'll have in that little packet that you received, that booklet, as to where to sit, what you do, and the parliamentary procedures of how to react within the delegate assembly. So we're trying to capture all new members, but yet have a robust discussion about what to discuss with your own school committee members before you come to the delegate assembly. Hopefully, we made that goal, and it was fruitful.
So yours?
So, moving on, I think the only other thing which we had for discussion was the change of the bylaws, which I think Pat already kind of would have explained.
I don't know if you wanted to hit
The terms.
the Chapter 70 issue.
Okay, so you hit the terms, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the only other questions was if Glenn could kind of go over what the Chapter 70 team and commission is. Glenn, maybe you could kind of give a brief overview as to who's involved in that. That we do have one representative from the school committee, I mean the MASC Board of Directors, but it's a multitude of people, and
Again, I'll be very, 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 very brief on this one, because the representative to the commission on Chapter 70 is the president of MASC, Anne Marie Cunho. Pat Francomano is the alternate. He becomes president in January. So Pat will actually be sitting with us while we're auditing what's happening in the room. The commission is going to discuss any and all questions related to Chapter 70 and the foundation budget. So that debate could be all over the place. It could be about, is there enough money in the foundation budget? Is it truly adequate, or does it need to be recalibrated? Do we appropriately apportion the costs? Do we adequately consider special education? Is it fair with regard to how it determines wealth? All kinds of issues could be brought up, and there'll be hearings around the state. One of the things that we thought would be helpful at this meeting was if you had specific thoughts about what needs to happen. And I would make a personal plea, because we're on tape here, a personal plea that your personal thoughts be delivered succinctly and to the point. We could record them and compile them, and I'd sort of yield the floor to Pat here, because he's the person that may be in a position to address them before the actual commission itself. Again, I know this is late, and I know that we're running out of time, but here's the person who actually will be able to do something about this.
Oh, no pressure there.
Along with about 20 other of his nearest and dearest, soon-to-be best friends.
So Mindy had a couple of good points before that I think that really hit. Do you want to add anything to it?
I'm so glad you're going to be on this committee. Part of the dream team. I know that you're going to address the percentages of special ed, IEP students. For example, on vocational education, we have upwards beyond 35% of our students have IEPs. I think we're permitted 6.5% in the formula. There's a cap on it. I think it should, I would like to see it reflect real numbers as opposed to what they think they can afford. The second thing is
That-
And they are also our concern, because we really try to focus on issues, and they overlap with family. So, my thing is special ed, reflect real numbers of IEPs, beef it up on guidance, and understand that we are concerned about the emotional well-being of our students. And we have to deal with things we've never had to deal before.
Yep.
Okay? And
And the physical
well-being
well-being.
as well of our students.
Thank you. Yes.
Two questions. The first is, what is the time frame? When do you expect beginning and end?
The first meeting is October 20th, if I recall correctly.
Are you under
I don't know that there is a reporting deadline, per se. The reporting would be back to the legislature, if I understand it correctly. Yes.
Okay, well, my second question is, you mentioned that there will be community meetings or public
Hearings in various areas.
hearing is a turnoff to many people, the generic public.
Sure.
So, I guess my corporate request and anything else is that, we have a state rep who's very invested in education and I think that the general public needs guidance as to how, or still needs guidance as to how to promote these kind of activities when they come to a local
Okay.
area. Our state rep is doing a lot, suicide prevention right now, and there's been a lot of publicity and doing, which is terrific, and I think we need something similar, not just a little box in a corner of a local newspaper saying, come to a hearing, that's when people off right then and there, and then also we need to know how
How to mobilize your community to come out. Okay. And we should be able to help you with that. John?
Just a point that people probably know, but a reminder, as you prepare for fiscal 16, people should be reminded the traditional House 1, because there'll be a new governor, will not come out the end of January, but the end of February by statute.
Thank you for that reminder. Yes, sir.
Couple of things. Talk about schools, we should be talking about the whole school, from K through 12.
I would take it pre-K to age 23, 22? To 22.
22, okay, I accept that.
A friendly amendment.
Yes, accept that, definitely. One of the bases is, we've said this all along, is money. It's not fairly distributed in everything that we do. One of the things I haven't heard anybody speak about, we start our school years in about another couple of weeks. We start counting those kids that came in, that we won't get their money until next year. Now, in our case in Brockton, we're talking 700 to 1,000 kids, maybe 1,200 kids this year coming in after school is started. That money doesn't show to next year. What do you do with that kind of shortfall? We've got a shortfall this year of 5.6 million. You think you got problems? Okay.
Wow.
So that's the kind of thing, of all these things you're talking about, and everything you've mentioned, we have. Probably
So,
you'll have to
so the
look at
thought,
larger
just to
district in the state.
rephrase, so your thought would be that as part of a reworking of the formula, there has to be some mechanism by which you can deal with today's kids with today's dollars that come in halfway.
Right, either halfway or maybe mid-November, you can submit the difference, so at least you can pick up some of that. Because, again, when you get into large numbers, that's some serious money that you're trying to upfront. And unfortunately, because of what's happening with housing also with us in our area, this is gonna increase in the next few years.
Understood.
So, that's another issue altogether, but those are things we need to look at, and we're not looking at it all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I just wanted to add a couple comments to the issue of study spend. I felt that often when we do inclusion really well in the community, you kind of get penalized, so we get reimbursed for,
compensated for the fact that we
No.
are doing it.
Yes, absolutely.
And then the one other issue is the wealthier communities in Marshall. The last 5-year plan, we really got dinged because we were looked at as not paying as much as we could pay relative, and so the wealthier communities around us actually have done better over the last 5 years than we were getting cut. And it's not an appropriate look at what the wealth and like doesn't really represent the community and their ability to pay. So I think that is huge, and I'm sort of concerned about what can individual communities do to be sure that they're understanding we have to deal with flood insurance and we have to deal with, all the things that are made up, that they.
Some of the nuances of the individual communities that don't fit into the formula.
Say this is what impacts us.
Okay. Yes.
I agree that you have to look at the community's ability to pay. And I'm probably gonna say something controversial, but it won't be the first time. Eventually, it's the cities against suburbia. That's where the ballgame is. And it's who's gonna win, and I don't think the city's gonna win forever. I just don't think it's gonna happen.
Yes.
2 speakers ago, I want to say this.
Anybody else? Chapter 70.
Just one more thing.
Yes, Jay.
I would actually take that a step further. It's not just cities against, or not even against, just different than suburbia. It's rural too.
Yeah.
Where I come from, in the western part of the state, there's districts in the Berkshires right now. They're still, we try to get them to New York.
Yeah. New York keeps sending them back.
They keep on taking them back over here. But when we're looking at our schools in the Berkshires, and this goes for some of our schools even along the Route 2 corridor in Massachusetts, so it's not just a regional issue. It depends on the district that you're in, is that we have schools that have lost so much of their student population over time that in the Berkshires, there isn't a school district that hasn't lost more than 10% of its student population, or less than 10% of its student population in the last 10 years. They even have districts that have lost 30% of their student population over the last 10 years because of the nature of the Berkshires, the economy of that region on there. They're paying for schools right now that they don't even occupy anymore. They're still financing the debt. So a lot of these districts are really at a stranglehold right now, trying to provide the services that we sometimes take for granted. So we have to look at those districts as well when we're looking at the chapters.
The same can be said about the Cape, because the Cape has its own issues that you wouldn't think that the Cape would have. And I think the more that we can become specialists in our own districts and understand what's going on in our own districts, but we're much more effective advocates when we understand what's going on at statewide, and we can appreciate more what our other brother and sister districts are going through, and step up and make sure that they're getting the kind of support, because we're really all in this together. I hate to I hate to sound like that, but we are in this together. You guys, you're on the front lines. You're the ones that are making the difference. You are the advocates out there. You are the ones that are standing in between those that would want to kill public education as we know it, and the students who desperately need a good public education system. Do we have anything else on Chapter 70?
So, this is just a little bit. Has anybody looked at the bookend, how that works, how well it works with multiple cities and towns? Exchange of students, the monetary piece of it, the ability to get along versus each fiefdom, city, town, etc., that we have across the state that may not work anymore given the cost of just everything. I mean, that could apply to anything that we do, but basically in education, it certainly makes some sense. And I don't know if any studies have really been done how successful that has been. Certainly to work with each other, that part's been successful, but the educational part itself. And if so, has anybody given any real consideration of trying to break the fiefdoms up to doing something along that line?
Jake? Jake? Yeah, just one second.
We do have some examples of that. I mean, my district is part of a 7-district collaborative in Western Massachusetts. And what our district does is we also do our vocational education together. So we have a half-day program for our students who are interested in vocational technical education go to an off-site facility, and it's a 7 members pulled together. They also do our transportation collectively. So collectively, we run our own transportation. So I think there's models and examples we can look at in the Commonwealth. Certainly the issues that happened up on the North Shore in the Merrimack Valley with the collaborative there, it was really disturbing, but there are examples of where those types of collaborations for major substantive issues like transportation, vocational, technical education, special ed actually work, and we have one right in the Pioneer Valley.
And vocational education, Southeastern Regional Voc Tech, we are 8 towns in the city of Rockland. I will tell you that it costs the state about double to send a child to a vocational school. We are very successful. It's an incredible opportunity for students. The model just isn't cost effective to spread beyond our needs, but nevertheless, there are 26 vocational schools, regional ones in the Commonwealth, and most of them have waiting lists of students, so we certainly can expand. 8 towns in the city of Rockland, I gotta tell you that it's no picnic. You get them all to agree to anything. They're diverse. You have very wealthy towns and struggling towns. You have towns, Rockland is a good part of our student body. Some of the other towns are only a fraction, yet everybody has a say. So, you know, it's just a different bag of problems. And as far as the educational opportunity for students, it's incredible, but it is costly.
I think you answered the question. You said it was double the amount of money going in, and maybe that is the question. The question is, what is the worth that we should be paying for the education of our children, period? Okay, and there are problems. I think one of the things that we have it as a school committee, each in their own pockets, but there's certainly school committees across the state that do that because they have the ability to do that. A lot of places don't, so it's still back to that dollar, like it or not. All right, now how you distribute that out equally is part of the question. But again, we're using systems, as I think a few people, you mentioned some of them, don't fit today. You know, you don't have parents at home all day. You know, you have a lot of things have changed. When I came through school, some of you in the room here, polio, you got your shots in school. You got your hearing test in school, you got your eye test in school. All that stuff is gone. All these things that we talked about, we didn't get meals in school. You brought that yourself. But there are a lot of things that need to be changed that we can change relatively easily that would fit and help our children become more of what we are today. But we worry about the dollar in the wrong places.
I think that's a discussion that the Commission for the Chapter 70 could have down the road. And when we have 2 minutes, Mindy, 2 minutes.
I don't think there's a person in this room who doesn't think that we should be paying more to educate our children. I don't think there's a person in this room who doesn't realize that the future of this country, the future of the state is in the hands of our children. And there's nothing more valuable than to educate them.
Right.
That's our mission.
Well, I think that's the mission of this whole session here, is we're all school committee, we're all looking out for the children. I think, unfortunately, we have to wrap up the time here, and one quick one, real quick.
One quick question, is the virtual schools on the MASC radar, or is it part of the charter school?
It was addressed with major reform legislation last year. We're monitoring the situation now.
So how is the enrollment, do you know?
It's virtual.
It's in the cloud. So I would like to offer you, there is dessert out there. If anybody would like dessert, please feel free. I want to thank Pat Francomano, our president-elect, Jake Oliveira, who is our vice president, Glenn Kuchar, our executive director. And I'd also like to acknowledge that the MASC Division Division 3 Executive Board is Chris Ghilarducci, is right over here, and Lynn Caparella is the Secretary Treasurer. I hope this was fruitful, and you bring home to your school committees a good, robust conversation, and we look forward to seeing you at the conference in November. Thank you.
Feel free to shoot.